Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning. A generation ago, the rage was creating a living will. We spoke of what we were leaving to our children that wasn't material, and it certainly wasn't immaterial. What life lessons were we teaching? What values were we passing on? And finally, what have we learned about the nature of life that was worth teaching our children? Phrases like life isn't fair or there's no substitute for hard work made the list of things we had learned in life. Maybe for some of us, we had learned it the hard way and wanted our children to glean the information, the wisdom that we had gotten in our lives. So what happened, interestingly enough, which was spurred by a question from my niece, Sophie, who lives in White Plains, and of course the fact that I'm going to be teaching a course in the fall at Mercy, now known as Mercy University. I tried to develop over the course of this summer a series of categories of personal philosophy and how you might, for you in your own life, develop your own personal philosophy. What do you believe about God? What do you believe about religion? What do you believe about the nature of man? What are people's natural inclinations? Are they towards good or towards evil, or are people morally neutral? What's the purpose of prayer? Is identity a critical component of being human or a barrier to connection? And finally, and probably most controversial, is the category born of the previous question, and that is, why is Jewish survival necessary? These are the questions we can ask because for one of the few and maybe fleeting moments in Jewish history, we have the luxury of thinking about these things. And so we must fill this month preceding the high holidays with these big questions. So for today, the question is, what is the role of reward and punishment in our own lives? And does it still play a significant role for us as mature adults living thoughtful lives? What I'm trying to accomplish today is really less inspiration and more an opportunity for personal thought and recovery of what we have always believed in our lives. So I ask the simple question, are we motivated in our lives to behave in certain ways because of the rewards that we receive or because of fear of punishments that may ensue? Do we eat right and work out just because they make us feel better, or because we want to avoid a heart attack? Or maybe we want to just outrun diabetes when we eat too much junk. We ask ourselves these little questions, but they have lasting and larger implications. Do we do things because we want the reward, or do we do them because we fear the punishment? Do we have a prayer practice because it grounds us, or because it connects us to each other and to God, and that all makes us feel good? It's another formulation of the question, do we have a prayer practice because we want the rewards or because we fear the punishments? Are we motivated by what we gain or by a fear of what we're going to lose? Today I ask you to break that paradigm altogether, to throw off the shackles of that mindset, to throw off the notion that has been written into our thinking from childhood both personally and nationally. I don't want us anymore to think about reward and punishment. Contrary to almost every biblical and rabbinic text, I ask you to join me outside the box when I suggest that I do not believe God keeps a ledger. I don't think that every action that we have done in our lives is recorded. I suggest to you today that the only thing God really wants of us is personal growth into kindness, generosity, and sincerity. That God doesn't judge us when we miss the mark or when in our lives we become distracted from the important issues. God cares about you and that you develop meaningful lives in the few years you have been given on this planet. I don't think God has a book in which every action is recorded. I ask you, as you prepare for the high holidays, what would it feel like if the only one judging you as you make your way through the machzor is you? Maybe you're the only one judging you. I ask you now to prepare for the high holidays and ask yourself, what would it look like if every time the text says, I sinned, that you imagine God as a shepherd who's watching over you, guiding you in a better direction, not as a judge looking to see where you went wrong? What would it feel like if over the course of the high holidays, every time you said, I did this wrong, you imagine a God who is a potter, who is shaping you into something better? This week's Parashat is filled with rules about kindness to animals, helping an animal whose burden is too heavy, returning animals when you know who their owner is, and taking care of animals when you don't know who their owner is. And then, of course, there is the most famous story because of a sage in our tradition known as Elisha ben Abuya, who was made popular in a book called As a Driven Leaf by Milton Steinberg. The law is summed up in basically two words, shiluach hakan, send away the mother bird in English. Just that phrase sums up the entirety of the challenge of why righteous people suffer and why evil people sometimes succeed. It's a book written by Harold Kushner called When Bad Things Happen to Good People, which I have to tell you honestly, in moments of crisis, few people are asking that question sincerely. We must develop our personal philosophy when life is good, so that when life turns challenging, we can then apply that philosophy. When we're not experiencing tragedy or triumph, that's when we have to create our own personal philosophy. And then that personal philosophy is forged in the fire of extreme challenge. The phrase shiluach hakan comes from a sentence in this morning's parsha, ki karei kan sipur lefanecha b'derech b'chol eit u'b'chol haaretz efrochim o beitzim v'ha'em rovetzet al efrochim o al ha'beitzim lo tikach ha'em al habanim. If you are walking along the way and you see a bird's nest and it's in the tree and the mother is sitting on the fledglings or on the eggs, you can't take those eggs while the mother is still sitting there. You have to shoo away the mother. It's obvious what's at play here. There's a certain cruelty in surviving the natural world. No question about it. Animals kill other animals for sustenance. But as humans, we can mitigate the pain by not forcing the mother to watch her children taken from her, her eggs snatched from her. And for Rashi, that is cultivating a sense of observance about the nature of the world, that a life of observance of mitzvot fosters a life that is better, says Rashi. Im mitzvah kala she'ein ba chesron kis amra Torah leman yitav lecha ve'arachta yamim. Rashi says that the gift here is long life. And that is, if you cultivate the small mitzvot, you'll be able to do them with confidence, and then the bigger mitzvot will come more easily. Rashi says, let's not split mitzvot up into categories of those that are easy to do and those that are more difficult. The easy ones get us to the more difficult, and then we cultivate a better life, and then we'll have long life. Rashi is saying what most every other rabbi has said for generations, and that is, if you do the mitzvot, you live longer. That's just not true. So that's why I ask you this morning to think differently for just a minute. What if doing mitzvot was the reward in and of themselves, and not because you want to live a long life? Maybe the reward of a mitzvah is doing a mitzvah. Maybe the reward of being kind and respectful to your parents is because you should be kind and respectful to your parents. Mitzvah of shooing away a mother bird doesn't cost anything. He reminds us of that. But it's the Kli Yakar, who you should know is a super commentary. That is the Kli Yakar, Shlomo Ephraim ben Aaron of Lezhinsk, is a commentary not on the text, but on Rashi's comment. That's why it's called a super commentary, and he offers us real insight. Lefi shani mitzvah elu machazik ha'emunah bechidush ha'olam. The Kli Yakar says something just incredibly beautiful, that the reason why this mitzvah is taught is because machazik ha'emunah b'chidush ha'olam, that it restores for us. It strengthens our faith in humanity. And that is the greatest reward of all. When we see someone doing something kind, it restores our faith in humanity. We live in a world in which we look around and we see terrible things happening all the time, that people do terrible things to each other. And the Kli Yakar says, B'chidush ha'olam, we need emunah. We need an understanding that there are things around us daily that restore our faith in one another. In developing a personal philosophy about the nature of humanity, we sometimes believe, because we look around and see everybody behaving so poorly, that people are innately evil. The Kli Yakar says, do a mitzvah and counteract that. Kli Yakar says something simple. Don't live for something unknown in the future. Live in the here and now, and in the ability of the world to constantly renew itself. Don't live praying for the evil to get what they deserve. Pray for an act of kindness that inspires people to do good. Then turn that personal philosophy on yourself. Do something good, because it will propel you to do something good. Do something good because someone else might see you and be inspired to do something good. It will make the world a better place right now. To be a place where many people can come. To be a place where the doors are always open, and the experience of the divine and the safety of genuine community will revitalize you. That's what I've always said about the nature of our synagogue. It's got to be a place where the doors are open so that when you feel as if there is nothing good in the world, you can come and be revitalized. And then go back out into the world again. Not to stay here forever, but to go out into the world again and make it a better place. Last week, after the services were over, we began a conversation about the high holidays in which Abraham Joshua Heschel asked us, what do we want from the experience of being in synagogue? And the most common answer that people gave last week as we discussed this was to be uplifted, to be elevated by what they find here. We have to stop thinking about the ledger of did we do enough to make it into heaven, but rather think, have we done enough to make this world a better place here and now? Stop worrying about the rewards and the punishments and think about how to make yourself better, how to make this world better. And the future will take care of itself. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184. Chatzi Kaddish, please rise.